Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lim. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights inclusive, sustainable growth in the G20 opening, proposes global healthcare response team. Host President Cyril Ramaphosa stresses Global South agenda in the G20 opening statement. Ukraine's allies work to back US peace plan at the G20 in South Africa as Zelensky warns of difficult moment. And former Brazilian President Bolsonaro is arrested. He faces 27-year sentence for allegedly plotting a coup. Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered his remarks at the G20 Summit on Saturday in Johannesburg in South Africa. The Prime Minister proposed a few actionables to realize the dream of all-round growth. First among them is the creation of a G20 Global Traditional Knowledge Repository. Prime Minister said that India has a rich history in this regard. This will help to pass on collective wisdom to further good health and well-being. And Prime Minister said that India has always stood in solidarity with Africa. The PM noted it was during India's G20 presidency that the African Union became a permanent G20 member. Taking forward this spirit, India proposed a G20 Africa Skills Multiplier Initiative. Prime Minister said that collective goal should be to create 1 million certified trainers in Africa within the next decade. Besides, India proposed the setting up of a G20 Global Healthcare Response Team. Prime Minister Modi said that our effort should be to create teams of trained medical experts from fellow G20 nations who are ready for rapid deployment in case of any emergencies. To overcome the challenge of drug trafficking, especially the spread of extremely dangerous substances like fentanyl, India proposed a G20 initiative on countering the drug terror nexus. Prime Minister also stressed on efforts to weaken the wretched drug terror economy. G20 Leaders Summit opened on Saturday in Johannesburg, South Africa, with the President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering the first address as delegates gathered for the 2 days of talks. Ramaphosa spoke on South Africa's 4 G20 priorities that include debt sustainability, energy transition, disaster resilience, and critical minerals for growth.
We identified 4 high-level priorities. Firstly, we focus on action to strengthen disaster resilience and response. We have agreed that it is essential for the global community, international finance institutions, development banks, and the private sector to scale up post-disaster construction. Secondly, we agreed that we must take action to ensure debt sustainability for low-income countries. The G20 needs to renew its efforts to advance debt sustainability while at the same time laying emphasis on those countries in the Global South that are suffering from debt repayments. Thirdly, we said we should mobilize finance for a just energy transition, increasing the quality and quantity of climate finance flows to developing economy countries. Fourthly, we emphasized the importance of harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development through the beneficiation of the minerals at the place of extraction.
Earlier, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday arrived at the G20 venue. in Johannesburg to attend the G20 Leaders Summit in South Africa. South Africa has carried forward the outcomes from the previous G20 summits held in New Delhi and Rio de Janeiro, with solidarity, equality and sustainability being the theme of its presidency. It is the first G20 summit being held in Africa. During India's presidency of the G20 in 2023, the African Union had become a member of the G20. Prime Minister Modi met with a number of world leaders, including the Brazilian President Lula da Silva and leaders from the UAE and South Korea. The Prime Minister also met briefly with the head of the World Trade Organization, the Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, at the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. On the sidelines of the G20 summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Through a social media post on X, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "A very productive conversation with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, on the sidelines of the G20 Johannesburg Summit." Speaking at the Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, the French President Emmanuel Macron warned that the G20 is at risk as it fails to effectively address major global crises. President Macron noted the diminishing unity among member nations and stressed that the group is struggling to act collectively on key priorities. His remarks came as the summit took place without the US President Donald Trump, who boycotted the gathering. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged to work fast and constructively with the United States on a peace plan to end the conflict with Russia. In a video statement, he urged Ukrainians to remain united in what he described as one of the most difficult moments in the country's history, adding that he would not betray his country's national interest.
Now it is one of the most difficult moments in our history. Now the pressure on Ukraine is one of the most difficult. Now Ukraine may find itself facing a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either the difficult 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the most difficult and further risk. The national Ukrainian interest must be taken into account. We are not making loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all partners. There will be a constructive search for solutions with our main partner.
Earlier, President Zelensky had a phone call with the US Vice President J.D. Vance that Ukraine would work with the United States, he said, and Europe at an advisor level to work towards a peace plan for his country's conflict with Russia. At the G20 meeting in Johannesburg, the EU leaders will hold talks to discuss a new US plan to end the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that Ukraine's allies want to make this plan stronger and more fair, especially because many people worry that it gives Russia too many advantages. The plan suggests that Ukraine should give up some land in the east and promise not to join NATO, ideas Ukraine has always rejected. Many European officials feel that the US plan is too soft on Russia, and they argue that only Ukraine should decide the terms of peace. Despite the tension, Ukraine and its allies continue to hope for a fair, stable and lasting end to the conflict. The Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday welcomed the US peace plan, and he said that the plan could lay the foundation for a Ukraine peace deal, confirming for the first time that Moscow had actually received a copy from the United States. Putin, in televised comments, said that he believes that it can be used as the basis for a final peaceful settlement, adding that the plan had not been discussed in detail with Russia. Putin also threatened to seize more territory if Kiev rejects the proposal, claiming the recent capture of the Ukrainian city of Kupiansk.
We have this text. We received it through existing channels of communication with the US administration. I believe it can be used as a basic of a financial peaceful settlement, but it has not been discussed with us in detail, and I can guess why. The reason is the same. The US administration has so far failed to secure Ukraine's consent. Ukraine is against it.
Жить почему?
The U.S. President Donald Trump said that Ukrainian President Zelensky will have to like a U.S. plan to end the conflict with Russia. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump said that the approaching winter, the mounting death toll, and the repeated attacks on Ukrainian energy plants underscored the urgency of ending this conflict. Washington's 28-point plan calls on Ukraine to cede territory, accept limits on its military, and renounce ambitions to join NATO.
About your plan to meet with them?
I've spoken with their people. We have a plan. It's horrible what's happening. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I was president, and it's a shame. And I thought they should have acted quicker. But it's a cold winter, and a lot of the you talk about utilities, but a lot of the big energy-producing plants have been under attack. To put it mildly, to put it nicely. Yeah, we have a way of getting peace, or we think we have a way of getting peace.
G20 leaders on Saturday adopted a declaration calling for just lasting peace in Ukraine, the DRC, Sudan, and occupied Palestinian territory. The U.S. Republican lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene, a longtime ally of Donald Trump, who recently had a dramatic falling out with the president, said on Friday that she was resigning from the House of Representatives effective January 5, I beg your pardon. Greene hit out at both the Republicans and Democrats in a resignation video released. And she also posted a lengthy resignation statement on social media. The dispute between Trump and the Georgia lawmaker has fueled concerns among some Republicans that Trump's Make America Great Again base could fracture a year before midterm elections. Trump, who had dismissed the Epstein issue as a Democratic hoax, in fact signed the bill this week to release the documents after it passed both the houses, that's the House of Representatives and the Senate, with overwhelming support. The former Brazilian president Jair Bolsonaro has been arrested on Saturday by federal police. Bolsonaro was awaiting a decision by the Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes, who, the justice on whether he would be allowed to serve his coup plotting sentence under house arrest. In the request, the lawyer cited Bolsonaro's health problems. The former president has had recurring intestinal issues since he was stabbed while campaigning in 2018, including several surgeries, the last one a 12-hour procedure in April. In September, 4 of 5 judges on the Supreme Court panel voted to sentence Bolsonaro to 27 years and 3 months in prison for 5 crimes, including participating in an armed criminal organization, attempting to violently abolish democracy, and organizing a coup. Still to come here on DD India Live. The COP30 draft sparks a showdown as it drops fossil fuel phase-out plan. 30-plus nations demand a roadmap. Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. A major climate summit, the COP30, is heading for a dramatic showdown. And a new draft agreement has dropped all mention of fossil fuels, sparking outrage among the delegates. Critics say the text fails to address the root causes of the climate crisis, while others stress the need for financing and fair transition that respects national priorities. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay has the report.
The COP30 climate summit in Belém, Brazil, headed for a dramatic showdown on Friday as hosts dropped efforts to push for a global plan to phase out fossil fuels. The move has reignited tensions over the future of oil, gas, and coal in international climate negotiations. A new draft text was released without the mention of fossil fuels, removing all options that had appeared in earlier versions. The omission has sparked outrage at the two-week conference of nearly 200 governments.
Colleagues, friends, the political text released is simply unacceptable. It is not a serious basis for negotiations. It fails the Amazon, it fails science, it fails justice, and it fails the people we are here to represent. It simply cannot be legitimized. There is no mention of fossil fuels phased out, or phased down, or deforestation. Nothing. This COP is even failing to repeat language already agreed in previous years and under the global stocktake. Failing to name the causes of the climate crisis is not compromise. It's denial. It's criminal.
Amid the heated debate, India's Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav strongly underlined the country's position. He said India remains committed to domestic adaptation as part of climate action, but stressed the urgent need for scaled-up adaptation finance to bridge the widening global gap. Minister Bhupendra Yadav emphasized that a just transition must go beyond the energy sector, describing it as, quote, an economy-wide, all-inclusive, people-centered transformation that respects national circumstances, ensures equity, and secures social justice, unquote. As COP30 heads into its final stretch, the absence of fossil fuel language in the draft deal has set the stage for a fierce battle. India's stance on removing fossil fuels is that, while it supports the goal, any phase-out must be equitable and not uniform across nations, recognizing the need for a just transition that considers development priorities. With developing nations demanding equity, finance, and justice, the world watches whether Belém will deliver a breakthrough or deepen divides in the global fight against climate change. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
Well, the stalemate at COP30 seems to revolve around finance, trade measures, fossil fuel commitments, and institutional trust. And to give us some context, we have with us Eric Solheim. He's the former head of the UN Environment and now President, Europe Asia Center, and Nitin Bassi, a fellow counsel on energy, environment, and water. Thank you very much, both of you, for being with us. Mr. Solheim, there's a deep divide we can see over climate finance. The developing countries want some sort of a binding plan. Is there a middle ground, you see, that you can ensure the resources actually reach for adaptation and mitigation to take place?
I think in reality the issue is a bit different. It's not mainly about finance, it's mainly about seeing the opportunities. Look, the two giants of the global south, China and India, are seeing the opportunities in the green economy. And they're just moving ahead. They're not depending on global negotiations, they're just making the decisions. I mean, China, just in May this month, added 93 gigawatt of solar energy to the grid. That's much, much more than the grid in most nations. Very recently in the state of Andhra Pradesh of India, I visited Greenco's new facility. That's 6.5 gigawatt, enormous solar, wind, and hydropower as pumped storage. This is what's transforming the world. Actions on the ground by the leaders of the global south and by business, not the talks in places like Belém.
All right, Mr. Bassi, is there a mechanism or mechanisms in place to deal with, there are certain non-tariff barriers like carbon border taxes that make it difficult for countries to trade, and these taxes don't seem to meet the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities.
I mean, it's true that such single kind of pushed agendas can impact the trade that happens between the countries. What I would like to emphasize is that, Global South, or specifically India, we still continue to make headway when it comes to going green and moving towards the green energy transition. So I will just like to, further firm up what the previous speaker said. We have been making a lot of investments. Our solar, installed capacity has already reached about 127. India has been able to reach its 50% clean energy installed capacity well before 2030, the commitment that was made. Now, this COP was supposed to be the COP of action. This COP was supposed to be a COP which would have generated interest among the countries to ensure that there is a public funding worth 40 billion US dollar for adaptation.
Yes.
So this is something we are still awaiting, because the final text from the COP presidency is yet to be out, and it is expected sometime later today.
Indeed. Mr. Solim, given the lack of consensus on phasing out fossil fuels, what best can be done to ensure energy transition? And, is that goal of 1.5 degrees achievable by phasing down, not phasing out fossil fuels?
Fossil fuels will never be phased down based on global agreement in climate talks. Fossil fuels will be phased down by those companies who are now developing the solar energy. Look, solar energy is now the cheapest energy anywhere in the world. If you switch from coal to solar, it's not a cost. You don't need to be compensated for it. It's an economically viable solution. You save money. The Adani Group in the state of Gujarat to India, they are now making solar with battery storage, and that's cheaper in Gujarat than coal. So the switch from coal to solar will not happen because of global talks. It will happen because of the economic benefit of doing this. It's the cheapest solution. If you want to grow your nation, if you want to be energy independent, well, you go solar, because the sun is everywhere and it's the cheapest energy.
So you continue to emphasize on costs and making costs come down, and that will make things viable. But Mr. Bassi, how can COP30's disruption and the stalled negotiations be transformed into an opportunity to strengthen trust, transparency, accountability in this UNFCCC process? And if it fails, will that mean, the beginning of the death of the COP process?
First of all, I think there is a need to acknowledge that Global South itself has been able to do much more than they are made up to show. India and China being the examples of how we are leading towards a strong climate action. And what I also understand that along with other countries, for your information, about 140 plus countries have already started on the national adaptation planning, and India is among one of them. So for the climate action, both from the mitigation and adaptation purpose, we have started working. Now, the commitment on behalf of the global north or developed nations still has to be realized. And if those commitments are not realized, then unfortunately, the net zero target that many of the global south countries see, for example, India has said 2070 as a vision for the net zero. Another developed nation has 2050, and they have been asked to even reach before that. So if the finance is not made available on the table, if there is no money to drive such processes, the action, unfortunately, it won't lead to longer benefit. But I think the COP process will continue. The countries will keep on negotiating till they get what is expected and what they deserve from it.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for in this discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Solim and Mr. Bassi. Thank you for putting this into context for us during this bulletin, where we focused a little bit on the COP30 stalemate. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. My name is Mark Lynn. From all of us here in Delhi, thank you very much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.